Good evening. It's 8 o'clock. The top headlines tonight. The return of COVID. Cases are up 90% in 24 hours. Deaths crossed 200. That's including a backlog. But the rise is mainly in 3 states and there's no rise in hospitalizations. The centre asked Kerala, why have you halted reporting cases? How have you gone to zero? Meanwhile, Uttar Pradesh makes masks mandatory in districts next to Delhi. Inflation is at a 4-month high, 14.6% in March. Fuel and power prices are up by 34.5%. Meanwhile, the markets also tanked, the Sensex down by over 2%. The government says global supply disruptions are being caused by the war. That's why there's high inflation. The sinking of Russia's main warship, the Moskva. This video shows the last moments. Russia bombed cities again after Moskva was sunk in retaliation. An NDTV exclusive from the South Ukraine war zone.
Well, I've been hearing these artillery. I don't know if you can hear that also. Let's just play that sound. Yeah.
Lieutenant General Manoj Pande will be the new Army Chief. He will be the first engineers officer to be Army Chief. Delhi's communal clashes. The Delhi police said there was no permission given to the Bajrang Dal and VHP for this Shobha Yatra. The top cop Rakesh Asthana says there's no communal bias in the investigation. Meanwhile, a man with a gun, Sonu alias Yunus, is arrested along with 22 others in clashes. The Home Minister speaks to Rakesh Asthana, tells him he must crack down on all rioters. Back to jail, orders the Supreme Court for the minister's son, Ashish Mishra. The Supreme Court says victims' pleas were not heard by the High Court in granting bail. Well, Amway assets worth 757 crores attached by the Enforcement Directorate. The Enforcement Directorate says it's a multi-crore pyramid fraud. However, Amway says maligning our business will affect 5.5 lakh sellers on our platform. We will fight this legally. Our lead story tonight, is it the return of COVID? COVID cases are now up nearly 90% in the last 24 hours. The overall numbers are still very, very low. Cases are 2,184. Remember, many people are also not getting tested at this stage, but it's just showing a rise again. Deaths, now that's a major rise because it's 214. Yesterday, just 4 deaths were reported. Of course, yesterday was a holiday. Also, there is a backlog of around 60 deaths in this number. Vaccinations is up as well. Again, the days before were a holiday, long holiday, so the vaccinations had slowed down. Tests are also up. I'm down by 28.39%, and the daily positivity rate is 0.83, so that's up as well, nearly 50%. So those are numbers which in absolute numbers are not high, but what's worrying is the trend. Now, if you break down these numbers, the highest rise is actually in just 3 states as of now. So it's Delhi, which is really leading that rise, which has seen over 2,300 cases in a week. That's a 145% change over the previous week. Neighbouring Haryana is over 1,100 cases in a week. That's up almost 120%. And UP now has 550 cases, which is a 145% rise in the last 1 week. So cases are rising sharply in and around Delhi, in the NCR, in next door cities like Noida, Ghaziabad and Gurugram. There have also been overall 2,183 cases in the last 24 hours, which is the highest in the last 1 month. Also a 15% rise in weekly cases after 38 consecutive days of a decline, that is negative growth. So this is the steepest turnaround from falling numbers. And India's reproduction rate, or the rate at which cases are increasing, is now above 1 after 77 days. Again, this is a measure of cases growing. So states are announcing different measures. Uttar Pradesh has made masks mandatory again in neighbouring districts of Delhi. And the centre has written to Kerala asking how Kerala has gone from 300 cases to 0 overnight. Because for the last 5 days, there's been no data reported. So the centre is saying this data coming after a 5-day gap has actually skewed India's numbers and made it seem higher than it actually is. But one big worry in the NCR area remains schools, where cases are rising because many young children are not vaccinated.
At least 2 schools shut last week because of rising COVID cases reopened today in Ghaziabad, next door to Delhi. It is one of the places where masks have been made mandatory by the government. Local officials say cases are rising, mostly amongst children.
शासन के और माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी के निर्देश पर एक तो सर्वेलेंस की गतिविधि को बढ़ाया गया है। विगत कुछ दिनों में कुछ स्कूल्स में जो कोविड केसेस आई है सामने है, ओवरऑल एनसीआर में कुछ हद तक पॉजिटिविटी दर जरूर वृद्धि हुई है, परंतु समाज में कोई भी एज सच कोई हॉस्पिटलाइजेशन में इंक्रीज या कोई वृद्धि देखने को नहीं मिली है।
केसेस जरूर बढ़ रहे हैं, जैसे मौसम बदल रहा है तो केसेस ज़्यादा आ रहे हैं, पर दिल्ली की टोटल पॉपुलेशन जो है वो वैक्सीनेटेड हो चुकी है। साथ ही बहुत बड़ी संख्या में लोग इन्फेक्टेड भी हो चुके हैं। तो अब जो केसेस आ रहे हैं पॉजिटिव जरूर आ रहे हैं, बट दे आर नॉट सीरियस। हॉस्पिटलाइजेशन नहीं बढ़ रहा है उसकी वजह से।
In UP's Noida, also bordering Delhi, there are 65 new COVID cases. Almost 19 are students below the age of 18. 9-year-old Aradhak of Noida is back to online classes again. His school has been shut for a week after over 10 students tested positive for COVID. Offline classes will resume from Wednesday. The UP government is stepping up action with a big focus on schools. Face masks in public places back to being mandatory in Noida, Ghaziabad, Hapur, Meerut, Bulandshahr, Bagpat as well as distant Lucknow. Noida has ordered schools to set up COVID help desks to check students for symptoms and implement COVID protocols. The Noida administration's advice to parents is this: don't send children with COVID-like symptoms to school. Over 90 students in 22 schools of Gautam Budh Nagar and Ghaziabad tested positive for COVID since campuses reopened for the new academic session this month. Parents are worried, but especially those whose children are taking the boards from next week.
School close करना एक कोई मतलब permanent option नहीं है. If 40 students are there in one school, then they should call 20 student on Monday, then 20 student on Tuesday. Online classes ठीक है, ठीक थी, but still offline is better than online.
क्योंकि बोर्ड्स होने हैं तो बच्चों को एग्ज़ाम भी देना ज़रूरी है, तो हमारी तो सरकार से ये मांग है कि सेल्फ सेंटर करा दिए जाएं, कोई बहुत परेशानी नहीं है, बच्चों को इधर से उधर मूवमेंट नहीं करना पड़ेगा।
Several states in India had removed all COVID restrictions after cases came down. But with the numbers surging again, especially among children in some areas, the authorities are changing their action plans. In Noida, with camera person Sushil Rathi, this is Sukirti Dwivedi for NDTV.
And of course, the main thing is that doctors and the government are saying is that there's been no rise in hospitalization. So don't panic yet over COVID 4.0. Meanwhile, here's something else which is rising, and that's not good news either, because the wholesale price inflation has hit a 4-month high. It's 14.6% this March. That's double that of March last year. Fuel and power costs have surged the most at 34.5%. The government says the hike is because of global supply disruptions after the Ukraine war. Also, markets nosedived today when they opened again after a 4-day break. The Nifty and Sensex tanked for the third straight session. The Sensex is down by over 2%. It's over 1,000 points down. The Nifty also tanking by 1.7%. Investors' concern is inflation and commodity prices rise, and of course the continuing war in Ukraine. Also, IT stocks were really hit badly today. Infosys, the biggest loser after Q4 earnings. Maruti, meanwhile, gained over 1.4% after their price hike. And the big worry, of course, is that after those peace talks over 2 weeks ago, the status of the war in Russia and Ukraine is now actually at a stalemate and getting worse. This mainly because of the video we're showing you now, the sinking of the Russian warship, the pride of the naval fleet, Moskva. This video shows its last moments. Ukraine says it was hit by Ukrainian missile, and you can see it on fire there, sinking. Russia has, of course, said that this was because of a fire on the ship. That's why it sank. Ukraine has claimed credit for that. But after that sinking, Russian analysts have called for World War III, and Russia has stepped up bombing again in various cities. That means more deaths of Ukrainian civilians. NDTV's Vishnu Shom and team has an exclusive from the South Ukrainian war zone.
All right, so demining operations over there taking place in the very north of this country. But again, we are in Mykolaiv, that lies to the south, absolute south of Ukraine. We've reached a little while back. And as you can see, this is a completely bombed out hotel. This is an area that comes under frequent strikes, artillery strikes, missile strikes as well. It's been happening now for the last 3 days certainly, and every now and again these attacks do take place. So buildings like this in several parts of Mykolaiv have been targeted, and what you see over here is the remains of what was a hotel. We've also got somebody over here with us who's actually seen some of the attacks taking place. Hi sir, thank you for speaking to us. Did you see this? Did you see the attack over here?
Сюда бомба, сюда хорошая ракета прилетела. Большая, мощная,
The
тяжелая.
big, huge bomb covered
Вот
the...
сюда, и в
this
администрации, вы же там были, да? Бомбы хорошие
Okay,
улетели.
one sec,
This place and the administration we will go another
Yeah.
time. So it was a huge bomb from the aviation. It was an aviation bomb.
Right, it was by an aircraft
Yeah.
overhead. Which was struck.
Also, rockets are targeting through all the city, and one of the missiles just fell near his building, and the cassettes covered all his territory of his building. He shows his
Right.
building. He just living in that building in
Yeah.
30
Сейчас,
meters
как
from
сюда улетела ракета, сюда бомбочка
Yeah.
хорошая.
Let's just focus on this as we continue with this conversation. But let me ask you one thing.
this. When the bomb come
Yeah.
to the building, all the windows of his
И
house
за- и
was
сзади,
broken.
и сзади дом, окна все
And the
полетели.
house
Рядом,
behind this,
во дворе, да.
behind this building was broken, all the
Yeah.
windows.
Why are you still here? Do you not want to go away to the west?
А почему вы не выезжаете из города, не выезжаете подальше?
Ну, во-первых, у меня 5 правнуков, 2 детей.
He has 2 children and grandchildren, 5 grandchildren, so
Сейчас их бросить, что ли, и уехать?
he
У
can't
нас,
just leave them.
мы-то уже, как говорится, выживем. По 79 лет мне сбавить матерь.
He's saying that he 80 years old, so
Вот, а
he
я
will
волнуюсь за них,
alive,
за молодежь.
but he
Ну и с другой стороны,
want to
что ж,
take care about his sons and
Right.
grandchildren.
That sound that we were hearing, was that shelling? Could you ask him that sound that we were hearing, was that artillery shelling? What is that?
Вот это что
да,
звучит?
да, это ракета прилетела.
It's artillery strikes.
Artillery strikes on this
We can
area.
hear
Да,
now
значит,
artillery strikes.
Yeah.
Дело в том, что сейчас стык Херсонской Николаевской области, и там идут боевые действия.
Ага.
И оттуда, отсюда идет.
А далеко это отсюда?
Ну, километров 30-35.
30 kilometers from this place
Yeah.
is border between Kherson region and
Yeah.
Mykolaiv region,
Yeah.
and a lot of artillery guns are working there, and
Right.
just battles.
All right. Thank you, sir, very much for speaking to us. Thank you. Well, you know, I've been hearing these artillery. I don't know if you can hear that also. Let's just play that sound. Yeah. There are artillery strikes happening somewhere in this area. We don't know if I don't know if it's a target being struck over here or it's being done by Ukrainian defenders. But this area is now quite active, and I'm going to hand back as we try and assess our situation over here. Back to the studio.
Vishnu, thanks very much for that. And of course, so you and the crew stay safe. Meanwhile, in other news, well, India will have a new army chief on the 1st of May. Lieutenant General Manoj Pande, who is the current vice army chief, will be the new army chief. He will take office on May the 1st. He is the first officer from the Engineers Corps to become army chief. Well, the other lead story we're looking at, why is it that across India we're seeing communal clashes go up and happen in different states? First, we saw the clashes across at least 6 states for Ram Navami, and then again over this weekend, we've had clashes in Gujarat, we've had clashes in Maharashtra, and clashes in India's capital, Delhi, as well as what's becoming a hate wave of communal clashes across India, extremely worrying. At this time, the Home Minister, Amit Shah, has also spoken to Delhi's Police Commissioner, asking that strict action be taken against the rioters in Delhi's capital. The Delhi police have said that there was no permission given for this Shobha Yatra. We can see there the Shobha Yatra with the swords which was taken out on Sunday in Delhi's Jahangir Puri. On the other side, we can see that a man there with a gun, Sonu alias Yunus, who is there shooting at the crowd, who's been arrested by the Delhi police. Over 23 people have been arrested for these communal clashes.
Pictures of the Hanuman Jayanti procession in Jahangir Puri, Delhi, Minors carrying swords, knives, sticks and country-made pistols or kattas. Hundreds of people were part of this procession which turned violent close to a mosque.
जब हिंदू लोग आ रहा था 3 गाड़ी लेके आ रहा था इधर से कोई मुसलमान भाई कुछ नहीं बोला तो ये लोग यही गाड़ी खाली कर दिया तो कुछ आदमी लाके ऐसा धक्का मार रहा था तो यहाँ झंडा गाड़ने के लिए ये लोग उतर गया था वहाँ चढ़ गया था ये दोनों हमारा मुसलमान भाई पत्थर फेंका था वो लोग भी पत्थर फेंक रहा था तो दोनों तरफ से तो ये लड़ाई विवाद हो गया.
Eyewitnesses say that when the violence began, the police were not around to control the situation, and soon there was stone pelting from both sides. Arson, vehicles were vandalized, and shops were looted. Videos of the firing that took place on Hanuman Jayanti are now doing the rounds. Sonu in a blue kurta seen here in this video has been identified for firing in the air. He is known to have a criminal record. The violence lasted for half an hour before it could be controlled.
शांतिपूर्वक सारे काम हो रहे थे तो जैसे सी ब्लॉक से हम बाहर निकले और कुशल हॉल की तरफ को हम मुड़े तो बीच में मस्जिद पड़ती है वहाँ आकर के कहा सुनी हुई है वहाँ मारा पीटी शुरू हुई है. ये परचून की दुकान है इनका गल्ला लूटा गया है आगे वो चाउमीन की दुकान लगती है उसकी भी नुकसान किया गया है उसका भी सामान फेंका गया है. आगे हलवाई की दुकान है उसका काउंटर भी तोड़ा गया है. वहाँ गाड़ियाँ खड़ी थी उनके शीश से पत्थर मार गए ईंट पत्थर मार गए मोटे मोटे पत्थर.
A total of 9 people have been injured in the violence, of which 8 are policemen.
One of them, Delhi Police Sub Inspector Medalal Meena, received a bullet in his head.
आगे बहस शुरू हुई तो आगे आए तो वहाँ फिर बहस फिर झगड़े में बदल गई. झगड़े में फिर वो पथराव शुरू हो गया मस्जिद के सामने. 8-10 राउंड हो गए लगभग आइडिया. फायर करता देखा नहीं कोई लेकिन सामने सी ब्लॉक साइड से गोली आई.
The Delhi police has arrested 21 people so far, of which 2 are minors. 14 accused are from the same community. 3 country-made pistols and 5 swords have been recovered from the accused. Among those arrested is Ansar. The police claim he came into the crowd and instigated the violence. Ansar has cases registered against him in the past. Another accused is Aslam. According to the police, he fired the bullet which injured the policeman Medalal Meena.
Adequate पुलिस की व्यवस्था है और चाक चौबंद है. निश्चित रूप से वेपन अवैध था और अवैध तरीके से उसको यूज किया गया है तो इसीलिए उस पर कानूनी कार्रवाई हुई.
The wife of Ansar, who the police says is the main accused, says that her husband had gone to calm the crowds, that he had no role in the quarrel. The Hindu families living in his neighborhood say there's been no quarrel between them in the past.
हमारा हस्बैंड जाके मतलब छुड़ाने गया तो उसी को दोषी ठहरा गया. वो तो अच्छे के लिए गया था. अगर वो उसका मन में अगर गुस्सा रहता कुछ भी रहता तो वो भी तो घर से कोई डंडा वंडा कुछ भी लेके गया था.
11-12 साल हो गए यहाँ मगर यहाँ तो मेरे को हमारी गली में तो उन्हें आज तक दंगा नहीं किया था और मतलब गली के अंदर चाहे हिंदू हो चाहे मुस्लिम हो मगर कोई परेशानी होती है तो वो साथ देते हैं. हमारा भी साथ आधी रात देते हैं.
Forensic experts are also scanning the area as part of investigations. When the police reached the home of Sonu Chikna, who's been identified in the video as one of the accused firing in the procession to interrogate his family members, some women pelted stones on the police today.
रैली निकाले तो इसलिए गिरफ्तार कर दिया तो क्यों आप साथ में थे क्यों कर रहे हो पूजा क्यों कर रहे हो यही सब इसी चीज के लिए गिरफ्तार कर गया.
अभी ये पता तो है नहीं किस लिए गिरफ्तार किया. अब इसलिए कि हम लोगों ने ना क्राइम करा ना कुछ करा. बस हम रथ यात्रा में थे भाई हम हिंदू हैं हम अपना पूजा करेंगे. अब इस वजह से करा होगा.
But the fallout of Jahangirpuri can be seen in other sensitive parts of Delhi where security has been increased. Drones are being used for surveillance in many areas like Jamia Nagar and Jasola Vihar.
In all, 3 processions were taken out. Delhi police now claims that it is the last procession which did not have required permissions to be taken out from this route, and that is why they are now registering a case against people who participated in that procession. The violence, triggered when the procession reached the masjid gates. As far as investigations are concerned, crime branch has taken over and formed 14 teams and are investigating various aspects related to this case. In New Delhi, with camera person Xavier Thomas, this is Neeta Sharma reporting for NDTV.
Meanwhile, the BJP President JP Nadda has hit out at the opposition over communal violence. This after 13 opposition parties had written asking why the Prime Minister was silent about the communal clashes that had taken place on Ram Navami. Mr. Nadda said in his letter to the nation that vote bank politics has been dusted and rusted. There are 2 distinctive styles of politics in India today, the NDA's development politics versus the opposition's petty politics. He said that rejected and dejected are taking refuge in divisive politics, and they've waged an onslaught in the spirit of India. Why the silent on communal violence in Rajasthan's Karoli, and why the haunting silence on Rajasthan riots? What is the compulsion? Going on to talk about Indira Gandhi and firing on sadhus, and Rajiv Gandhi justifying Sikh killings. Mr. Nadda also attacked the Congress-led UPA for bringing in a horrific communal violence bill, and then listed cases of violence in Kerala, Tamil Nadu and West Bengal. Well, the other big headline, the Supreme Court today in a strong order has cancelled the bail given to Union Minister of State for Home Ajay Mishra Teni's son Ashish Mishra, who faces charges of murder for allegedly driving over farmers in Uttar Pradesh last year. In strong words of the Supreme Court, they said the Allahabad High Court had not given the right to victims to be heard before bail was given to the minister's son.
It is jail now for Ashish Mishra, the son of Union Minister Ajay Mishra. The Supreme Court today cancelled his bail. Ashish, who is accused of murdering farmers as his car ran over them in a crowd, was controversially given bail by the Allahabad High Court. In a rare order, a Supreme Court bench led by Chief Justice N.V. Ramana said, the High Court order is based on irrelevant observations and overlooked relevant considerations. The victim has unbridled participatory right in such a criminal trial process, the court said. We hold that the victims have been denied the chance of effective hearing. The denial of victims to be heard and the tearing hurry shown by the High Court merits the setting aside of the bail order, the Supreme Court ruled. Shockingly, the Allahabad High Court bail order had been given despite the UP government appointed special task force recommending against it, saying Ashish was present at the spot at the time of the murders. In Supreme Court though, the UP government backed Ashish Mishra's bail order, saying he was not a flight risk and witnesses were adequately protected. Ashish Mishra is accused of running over 4 farmers and a journalist during a protest at Lakhimpur Kheri near the Nepal border last October. He was arrested several days later, but only after outrage over the UP police and administration's slow response. Ashish is the son of powerful Brahmin leader Ajay Mishra Teni, who had openly threatened violence a few days before the incident. Today's order is likely to increase the political pressure against the minister and his continuance. In their petition before the Supreme Court, the families of the victims had said Ashish Mishra's bail must be cancelled as he is a threat to witnesses.
माननीय न्यायपालिका के से बहुत ही शुक्रगुजार हूं उनका कि उन्होंने जो फैसला लेना चाहिए था बहुत ही सही फैसला लिया गया है.
No one at the BJP office in Lakhimpur was willing to comment on the Supreme Court's order. Ashish Mishra's father, Ajay Mishra, the junior Home Minister, had dived into the UP Assembly election campaign here in this district the day after his son got bail in February this year. The BJP also won all 8 Vidhan Sabha seats in this district. With Ashish Bhargav, Pratik Srivastav and camera person Rajesh Gupta, this is Alok Pande, NDTV.
The Enforcement Directorate is calling it a multi-crore pyramid fraud against Amway India, and 750 crores of their assets, including consumer goods, have been attached by the Enforcement Directorate. The ED claims that their direct selling model has been used as a cover for pyramid fraud. Amway says that direct selling is now under the Consumer Protection Act. Also, that prices of products are higher than in the market, says the ED. However, Amway says that their misleading representation by the ED or media could affect 5.5 lakh livelihoods of their sellers. So as of now, however, Amway, which of course has a major chunk in the Indian market in this area, faces all their assets being frozen by the ED. Well, breaking news coming in. Delhi Capital's Mitchell Marsh has tested positive for COVID. Marsh, an Australian player, had 1 negative and 1 positive RT-PCR test. Delhi Capitals now have 3 squad members who've tested positive. Other test results still awaited. There's no decision on the Delhi versus Punjab game yet, but this, of course, comes amid rising cases in Delhi. So, a Delhi IPL COVID scare there. Delhi Capitals player Mitchell Marsh testing positive.